This is the Guns Magazine Podcast, episode number 70. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine Podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting people who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. But before we get started, let's talk about Berger bullets. Berger builds match-grade rifle bullets and ammunition for target, hunting, and tactical shooting applications. Proudly made in Mesa, Arizona, Berger uses the highest quality materials, tooling, and production processes to produce the world's most accurate bullets and ammunition. Berger is unequaled by the competition and has established more long-range world records than all other manufacturers combined. To find out why our nation's elite operators, competitive shooters, and hunters all trust Berger to shoot better, visit your favorite retailer to experience Berger's uncompromising quality or learn more at bergerbullets.com. Everybody's moving to red dot sights on their pistol, but there are still many of us who like the reliability and simplicity of iron sights. Whether you're talking backup sights for your carbine or a set of big dot express sights for your defensive pistol, aftermarket sights are one of the most common modifications made on firearms. Today, we're talking with Monte Long, the production manager of XS Sights, about the what, when, where, and why of choosing aftermarket sights. Now here's my chat with Monte Long. Monte, you're the production manager for XS Sights. That's kind of hard for me to say with my twisted tongue, but today we're going to talk about aftermarket sights. You guys are probably one of the biggest aftermarket sight companies, and you're certainly known for your big dot sights, which I've known for a number of years, and now got a bunch of them on my pistols. But we're going to talk about aftermarket sights in general. So you're the guy, you're the expert, you're the person they shot me to. So let's ask the big question: why would somebody want an aftermarket sight on their great brand new production gun?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. One of the things that is the big primary reason is a lot of firearms manufacturers kind of look at sights as an afterthought. They're more concerned with the ergonomics of a handgun, magazine capacity, the accuracy potential of a particular system, and when it gets to the sights, they're just like, "Hey, this will fit. There we go." So there's a lot of times there's not a lot of thought that's put into it. That could be for cost reasons. It could be because sights are a very personal, preferential choice. I've got guys here in the shop that I work with that prefer our R3Ds, which is our version of a 3-dot. I've got a couple of guys in here that prefer the standard dot version of the DXT2s or the DXTs, the DXWs. And then you have guys like me who use the big dot. So it's a very personal preference, and that's one of the biggest reasons. The manufacturer doesn't worry about it because they know that it's a very personal choice.
Good point. So let's go ahead and dive into the big dot sights. I lovingly refer to them as golf balls because it sort of looks like there's a golf ball sitting out there at the end of your gun. And I love them for two reasons. First of all, they're extremely fast. You put the golf ball on a target and you're going to hit the target. Number two, for those of us reaching a certain age, it's a lot easier to see that big thing out there instead of some of those little bitty dots that folks are coming in. So talk about the history a little bit of express sights and how you guys came to be like the leaders in express sights.
Okay, yeah. So the express sight design actually goes back to late 19th, early 20th century. It was designed for hunting dangerous game in Africa. And what you have in that situation is you have a very large animal that is usually very unimpressed with the fact that you're trying to shoot it, that may be doing something like trying to come over and stomp you into a bloody hole in the ground.
Yeah.
Because Cape buffalo are kind of tempted to do that. So you didn't need a set of sights that allowed for pinpoint accuracy and absolute precision at 100 or 200 or 300 yards. You needed a set of sights that allowed for an acceptable shot on a dangerous game animal at fairly close distances as quickly as possible. And I don't know who designed it originally, but that's what they came up with, was a large white dot with a shallow V rear. probably what it started out as, and then the vertical stripe got added later because that allowed for an acceptable shot on a dangerous game animal. Fast forward into the mid to late 90s, and one of the gentlemen that founded the company that is now XS, Ashley Emerson, came up with the idea of, on the defensive handguns, I don't need a bullseye shot at 30 yards. I need to put a bullet where it needs to be to stop a threat at, bad breath distance, 10 yards, maybe 15 yards, and I need it as quickly as possible. Ashley, being a longtime hunter, looked at the express sights and went, that worked really good on dangerous game in Africa and still does. I bet it'd work real good on a handgun for dealing with two-legged threats trying to cause me problems. And that's where he got the idea. He got together with Ed Pastusik, who was the original owner of XS Sights. Unfortunately, Ed's passed away, and it's his wife and his children running the company now. And they started designing and manufacturing handgun sights based on the express sight concept.
Well, I got to say, I've known about them since probably the early 90s, I'm guessing. And, I was blessed to be around some of the real deal guys, Colonel Cooper, and I first saw them on one of Louis Auerbach's personal carry pistols, and I thought, what a great idea. And I was familiar with the idea of express sights on African rifles, but I thought, what a brilliant idea, put them on a gun, and again, you put that golf ball out there, put it on a bad guy, and press the trigger. And like I said, a lot of the guys that I really looked up to that really knew what they were talking about and had been there, done that, and they really favored these sights.
Yes, sir. And I've talked to a lot of people that have actually used handguns defensively over the years that have been really, really fond of them. I never had a chance to really talk to Colonel Cooper. He was still alive and still doing some stuff. When I got started in the industry, I just never had an opportunity to meet him or talk to him at a trade show. But I have met Ashley. I'm fortunate enough to have shot with Ashley a few times. I do know a lot of people that trained with Colonel Cooper, most prominently at the moment, who's still alive and with us, Ken Campbell, who you were mentioning when we were talking briefly, and then Richard Mann, Richard being a good friend of mine, that loved them, and they got introduced to him through Colonel Cooper, who had used them and had used handguns defensively for real and was a big fan of them.
I'm going to ask this question because it's kind of a hot topic right now, is why would I choose a express sight over that mystical television red dot that I've now put on my pistol and all of them are coming with?
Again, like I said earlier, a lot of it goes to personal preference. There is definitely some advantages to a red dot sight. Any form of sights is basically a reference point. It's a way to reference the handgun onto a target or a rifle onto a target to allow you to place a bullet where you want. So it's a reference system. With the red dot, you've got your aiming reference in the same focal plane as your target versus iron sights where you've got multiple focal planes to get together to allow an acceptable shot. Me personally, I prefer the irons. I can use a red dot on a handgun. I'm just much, much more comfortable with the iron sights on the handgun. Probably has something to do with, 20-ish years of shooting iron sights and only about 3 years of playing with a red dot on a handgun. I'll admit that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. The old dog, new trick thing.
Yeah. My iron sights, they don't need a battery. They don't fog up. When the battery dies, if the tritium lamp in my sights die, I still have everything else about the sights that allow it to work as long as I've got a little bit of light to see what's going on. Now, there's nothing wrong with the red dot. I know lots of people that have been using them that have had real good luck, and they've come a long way in the last couple of years. Me personally, I like the simplicity of the irons. I'm used to it, and it with the way things are right now, finding ammunition, I don't want to try and acquire ammunition to spend more time getting used to the red dot.
Yeah. Well, I think I've made it pretty clear. I'm a big fan of the big dot sights, but the kick against, well, they're not very accurate. What are the disadvantages to using a red dot or big dot?
It takes a little more time getting used to get the accuracy. I've heard that many times, and my answer to that is, yeah, you need to practice more. Recently, I bought one of the new VP9 optic ready guns and ordered one of the long slides for it. Was bored the other day, or one of the, like the weekend after I got it. Went out to the range, and it's like, hey, it's a VP9 long slide. It's got the funky O-ring on the end of it, like they used on the Mark 23s. It's supposed to make them just super accurate. So I benched it down and shot a group at 50 yards. Yeah, my benched group at 50 yards was about 2.5 inches. My offhand group at 50 yards was about 3.5 inches, and that's with a big dot.
Wow, that's good shooting with any kind of sights.
Yeah, not accurate. Not accurate. Well, okay, maybe a red dot or a scope would have got me a little more accuracy, but then again, 3.5 inches at 50 yards is tight enough of a group to shoot anything I need to shoot.
Yeah, I'll take that. So this is completely subjective and based on the shooter and about a trillion other factors, but is there a distance where you guys say, well, that may be getting too far?
Not really. I mean, it's one of those, they're designed to zero at 25 yards. 12 o'clock top dead center of the dot at 25 yards. And the reason behind that is handgun, like anything else, we're going to get into some ballistics here. When we actually press the trigger and the bullet leaves the barrel, it's actually being sent downrange at an upwards angle. It climbs. It's not actually propelled with a rocket. It's technically, you get people go, oh, it rises. Well, no, it climbs into your line of sight because you launched it at an upward angle. But it comes out, the bullet rises, comes to your line of sight, and then drops below it generally. By zeroing at 25 yards, anything inside 25 yards, if the white dot or the orange dot or the yellow dot, depending on which variation of the DXTs you have, your bullet's going to hit somewhere close enough to do what it needs to do. Basically, it was designed so that if you've got a threat inside 25 yards, you put the white dot at the top of the sternum and press the trigger, and they're going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
And that's what they were designed for, was a defensive set of sights. You can use them much further. The longest shot I've made with a pistol with big dots was at 300 yards. Now, granted, that was, I did not hit it the first round. It took me about 2 to get it walked on, and that was a BC size steel silhouette. So it was a fairly large silhouette. But yeah, I've shot them out to 300 yards on a handgun. Our XTIs, which are the offset sights for carbines, right after we first started those, I was up at Whittington Center in New Mexico shooting the Rocky Mountain 3-gun with some friends of mine, and a good friend of mine wanted to check zero, so we went over to the zero range. And if you've been to Whittington, on the zero range, they've got a 200-yard zero range, and then up on the hill at 3, 4, 5, 6, and like 700 yards, they've got some steel targets.
Right.
Yeah, got Mike's rifle zeroed at 100, and I was like, hey, spot me on the bear, because it was a bear steel silhouette at 400 yards. He walked me in. It took me 3-4 rounds to get walked in on the target. I got walked in and said, hey, Mike, look at this. And he picked his head up and looked, and that's when I broke another shot. I was standing offhand using the XTIs at 400 yards on a full-size bear steel silhouette. It's a matter of once you get used to whatever sighting system you have, be that the big dot DXT2s or the standard dot DXT2s, anything else. Once you get used to it, spend some time with it, you can actually shoot them a lot further than most people realize. It's just a matter of understanding what you need to see in a sight picture, making a good trigger press, and knowing the ballistics of whatever firearm, whatever cartridge you're using.
That old magic formula of 3 words that we keep talking about: practice, practice, and practice.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you raised the question. Good time to get to it. So you guys have 3 different high visibility colors. I've got examples of each on various guns. Talk about choosing among different colors for sights. And actually, you probably got 4 because you got white. So what are some of the criteria when you're picking that?
There again, some of that's personal preference. White is going to reflect everything in the visible spectrum. If you've got any amount of light available to you, white should reflect it. Our optic yellow is very, very close. In the DXT, the original big dot family, the front sights are not photoluminescent. Now, they've got the tritium lamp, which is self-luminous, but the white ring surrounding it is not photoluminescent. When we went to the DXT2s, we added the option of optic orange, optic yellow on the big dot, or green on a standard dot. Those 3 colors are photoluminescent, meaning I can take a flashlight, I can take the overhead lights here in my office, or sunlight is going to give them some light. You remove a light source, you walk into a dark room, they're going to glow themselves. That big ring is going to glow. It's just re-emitting the light that it's absorbed. White, we've tried the white. We haven't been super happy with doing a photoluminescent white dot. The yellow, the optic yellow and the optic orange show up a lot better with the photoluminescent properties. In regards to whether you should pick the optic orange or the optic yellow, which color do you see better? Me personally, optic yellow is a lot easier for my eyes to pick up in the widest range of lighting conditions. If I were doing nothing but shooting in bright sunlight on a good range, I'd consider the orange because I can see it pretty good in that situation. But late afternoon, sunrise, sunset, when the light's a little off, the yellow is a lot easier for my eyes to see. So that's why I stick to the optic yellow. The green is kind of somewhere in the middle. And that's what we use on the standard dot. That was the decision we made. It's just a matter of kind of playing with them and figuring out which one works best for your eyes.
And I think you made a critical point in a variety of conditions, because we tend to go out on a nice day, on a nice, well-lit range, and we shoot. And as we know, especially with defensive firearms, that typically it's 2 a.m. and it's raining and your hands are full of groceries and you're trying to keep the kids back. So seeing how your eye and the sight system interacts on in varying light conditions is pretty critical.
Absolutely.
Well, okay, here's the fun part for me. I am fascinated for some strange reason about tritium. Tritium, I know it's nuclear, as George Bush used to say. Aside from that, I know it's some kind of crazy voodoo that emits light or whatever. So what exactly is tritium, and how did it come to be used in firearm sights?
Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. You're getting into some stuff that's not really, I know what it is. Yeah. I don't know how to explain all of it very well.
That's good because it's over the head of an editor.
Yeah. No worries. It's a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. It occurs naturally. We get a certain amount every year, all of us, just by being alive. It is also a byproduct of certain types of nuclear reactions. The tritium that you find in gun sights or in watches or emergency signs, that's all generally comes off of a nuclear reactor somewhere. Is stored, and then it's put into a glass container that's coated with phosphorus. And what happens is the radioactivity emitted by the tritium gas, because tritium is a gas, reacts with the phosphorus and creates a glow. It's not the tritium itself that's glowing, it's the reaction of the radioactive waves it emits exciting the phosphorus inside of a glass tube that causes the phosphorus to glow.
So who's the big brain guy that thought, this would be really cool for stuff like gun sights?
I honestly don't know. I think it started being used as a self-luminous way to look at something. With watches, and as far as I know, in the U.S., Dr. Bendon that founded Trigicon was the person that started using it in gun sights. And at least that was the first. Me personally, that was the first I heard of it was Trigicon, and they're still around and they make some good products. In fact, for the longest time, Trigicon did installations of tritium lamps in steel sights for us. I mean, I started with XS in 2004, and up until 2015 or 2016, I think I'd have to. A little later than that, 2017, 2018 is when we started. When we got all the licensing set up so that we could do our own lamp installations. We used Trigicon to install lamps in our sites because they knew how to do it and they did a good job.
Because I talked to some of your folks a couple of years ago, and they're very proud of the fact that you guys actually do it yourself now, and that is a pretty significant hurdle to get across with all the licensing and safety.
Yes, sir, because it's radioactive material, so you get to deal with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is a federal agency, but you also get to, at least here in the state of Texas, we also have to deal with a state agency, and I think it's Department of Health who handles radioactive stuff in Texas, but I could be wrong on that. Yeah, that would be, the Tritium manager would know all of that way more than me.
Well, I guess the question is for folks that don't know much about radioactivity like how safe is this stuff? I've heard terrible stories. If you break your sight, you're going to get a big tumor growing over your eye real fast. I mean, is this stuff that dangerous?
Absolutely not. It's one of those, it's a very weak beta emitter. Beta is one of the lowest risk versions of radioactivity. Tritium gas has to be ingested or inhaled. That's it. That's the only, unless you have a gaping wound on you, in which case you have bigger problems, and you break a tritium lamp, the only way you can get it is to actually breathe it in or eat it. And if you took every tritium lamp we had in the building, whether it was in a site or not, if you could magically remove it from a site, take that whole pile and ate them, you would have a bigger problem from the glass than you would the tritium. There is so little tritium in a lamp that it's really not a problem. If you break a lamp, as an individual, if your lamp breaks on your gun site, more than likely you dropped your handgun or it got cracked during installation, which happens, and it slowly leached out over a couple of days. That little bit of gas is going to dissipate into the atmosphere in nothing flat. Even if you manage to get everything that was in one lamp, that's about what you normally get just from breathing every year from naturally occurring tritium. If you thought you had a major amount, you drink lots of water and some form of diuretic. We're told beer works really good.
Excellent.
Drink a lot of it, and your body will process it, and you'll urinate it out.
So, see, beer is a medicine.
There you go.
So on the same topic, to get to the practical application, I've got old tritium sights here that are kind of starting to get weak, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I've just got them sitting here. I don't know what to do with them. So when a sight, you're done with it, and especially an old sight that's not quite as bright, what do you do with them?
Most of the time, I use them until they don't glow at all, at which point there's no tritium left in the sight, so it's inert. You just take the steel off and throw it away.
Okay.
If they're dim, they're still glowing, so I keep using them until they quit glowing.
Makes sense.
My personal experience with shooting in diminished light conditions, whether that be competitively or in training environments, I don't need a whole lot of tritium to actually be able to see the sights in those conditions. Well, if you run a handheld light, it's too bright and you can't see the tritium. Well, yeah. But if I'm running a handheld light, I'm picking up enough light off of that, I can see everything else about the sights.
Yeah.
I don't really need the tritium at that point.
Exactly. So let's talk about this. I know there's what they call a half-life, but basically, long story short, tritium does diminish. Tritium sights diminish over time, and they get less bright. So how long is that? I know the sights I've got they're over 20 years old. but they're still usable, like you said. So what is average, I guess, lifespan of tritium night sights?
Most tritium night sights come with a warranty of about 10 to 12 years. And the half-life of tritium is like 11.35 or something years, which means that from the day that the tritium gets put in a lamp and it starts glowing because it's interacting with phosphorus, 11 and a half or so years from now, it's going to be half as bright as it was. It continually degrades. There's not really a good gauge for how well a lamp is glowing, at least none that I'm aware of. We don't use one. It glows or it doesn't. But let's say we're going to throw a term out that most people are familiar with. There's nothing scientific about what I'm telling you. This is just to make it a little easier for people to understand. Let's say you have a set of lamps and a set of sights that glows at 2 lumens. 12 years from now, they're going to glow at 1 lumen. 12 years after that, it'd be a half a lumen. 12 years after that, it would be a quarter of a lumen. It's just going to continually, over time, slowly diminish.
Makes sense. So if your sights are getting to be 20 to 30 years old, it might be time to maybe look at a new set.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're at 20 years and they're still usable, that's pretty awesome. A lot of people get to the point where they say they can't see them, 10, 12, 13 years. Sometimes that's the tritium has just degraded to the point that they can't see it. And sometimes that's just there's dirt and debris covering the lens and just needs to be cleaned off. We see that a lot on the M1A soaker.
Does the environment affect it? I mean, heat, cold, any of those factors make a difference to it?
In regards to how long it lasts, no, not that I have noticed. As long as the lamp itself is steel sealed, the tritium's there. It's not a battery. It's not electronic, where heat and cold can have some effect. It's a radioactive gas, and it's emitting that radiation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, until it just decays to the point of being insignificant.
Well, in talking to my friend Ken, as we mentioned earlier, I asked him before we got started, I said, any thoughts on aftermarket sights? And he said, no, he basically echoed what you did, Monte, which is, it's kind of personal preference. And if they help you shoot better, great. But he said the only problem they see with them is installation. He said boogered up dovetails is pretty common, especially for guys that are trying to do it themselves. And I saw on your website where you've got a lot of detailed FAQ type stuff about installation and sight pushers. Talk a little bit about that, especially with the tritiums, because I've got some sights actually sitting right here next to me that I'm getting ready to install. And, I'm a little nervous about it, putting my sight pusher on it, and I don't want to booger anything up. So just kind of walk through that overall process.
Yeah, installation is the one thing that we get lots of questions about, and that's one of the fun ones is when somebody calls in. Well, can I install these myself? Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer, because I don't know. And a lot of times I don't necessarily know the individual that called to ask that question. I don't know how handy they are with tools. A lot of times, unless it's a Glock, I generally tell people they might really consider taking it to a gunsmith unless they have a little bit of knowledge or have time to discuss how to do some things. Most of our DXT2 family is machined from 1144 stress-proof bar stock. It's just about as hard as the slide of the handgun you're putting it onto. There's not much flex and there's not much give. So in those cases, the sights need to be appropriately fit to the dovetail before installation. It's not super complicated, but it does take some knowledge and some tools. A lot of our newer stuff, especially the R3Ds and the minimalist sights, we're using a different alloy. We're designing them a little different with the intention of being fairly easy to install with a press, a sight pusher or a sight press. But the DXT2s are kind of working there. We just haven't got there because there's a lot of engineering changes involved in that. Basically, on a front sight, rear sights get a little different. On a front sight, the way I personally do it when I'm installing them on one of my guns or guns for customers here, I take a set of calipers and measure the depth of the existing dovetail. Write that number down. Because if I don't write it down, I guarantee you I'm going to forget it, and I'm going to have to go back and measure it 3 more times.
Yep.
Which I usually measure it a couple of times to make sure I'm doing it right in the first place. But I'll write that down. And then I'll measure from the bottom of the male dovetail on our sight to the bottom edge of the sight blade and write that number down. There again, don't want to forget it. I want the measurement on our sight from the, let's say I've got a dovetail that's 50 thousandths deep, 0.050. On our sight, from the bottom of the dovetail to the bottom of the blade, I want that 55 to 60 thousandths, 0.055 to 0.060. If it still doesn't start into the dovetail like I want, at that point, if it's over 60 thousandths, I'll take material off the bottom of the male dovetail using a flat file. Once I get that dimension correct, if it still doesn't fit in the dovetail the way I want, and I want it to go a quarter to halfway into that female dovetail cut under finger pressure. And it can be pretty tight finger pressure, but I want to be able to get about a quarter to a halfway into the dovetail with no problem. And once I get to that point, I can drive it in with a hammer and a non-marring punch, or I can use a sight press or whatever. When I get to the point where from the bottom of the male dovetail to the bottom of the blade is where I want, in this case, 55 to 60 thousandths. If it still doesn't start in the dovetail like I want, I'll get a dovetail file and I'll start removing material from one of the angled faces on the male dovetail on the sight. Very important thing when you're installing sights, and if you do need to make a modification, unless it's something like an old Colt government model that needs to have a dovetail cut, in which case I really, really do recommend taking it to a gunsmith that's got a mill and a dovetail cutter.
Yeah.
I know some guys that have cut dovetails with a dovetail file by hand. I would not want to do that.
No.
But with the exception of cases like that, you always want to work on the sight. Because if something goes horribly, horribly wrong and you have to scrap something, the front side out of $130, $140 set of sights is a whole lot cheaper than a slide off of a $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 handgun.
Yep.
Trust me. Like I said, I want to get that dovetail filed to where I can get it a quarter to halfway in, and then I can use a press or drive it into place. Rear sights, if it's something like a SIG or an XD or a Glock, something with just what we call a trapezoidal rear sight, as in not an adjustable Bomar LPA or a Novak, you just take material off the bottom of the sight until it will, if it doesn't slip into the dovetail, you want to take enough material that it will slip about halfway in, and then you can drive it in place. One of the things we get is most of our express sights are a slip fit. They'll just slide right into the dovetail. Snug the set screws. Me personally, I go to the range, I'll shoot a group and make sure I'm happy with the windage, and then I'll apply the Loctite around it, give it 10 or 15 minutes, wipe that off, let it sit till the next day, and it's good to go. Novaks get a little more complicated because you've got the male dovetail and you've got a portion of the sight that overhangs to the rear. We kind of have to do that the same way we did on the front sight that we were talking about. Measures from we're talking about a Novak here. On the rear end, on the shooter side of it, you measure from that shelf to the bottom of the dovetail, and then you measure the opposite portion on the sight. Again, you want to leave yourself 5 to 10 thousandths. If it slides in at that point, awesome. If not, then you start working on one angled face, and then on the Novak, I always work on the one that's on the shooter side because there's none of that's exposed. Yep. So you won't be able to see where the steel's been removed.
Well, and the one tip that I always tell everybody, and I try to remind myself and fail to do it many times, is take your time. Don't get in a hurry.
Oh, yes.
Thinking of sight installs I've done, there's nothing worse than it won't fit. Oh, it fits really loose. And that's because I got a little, you start out very slow and a few strokes in, I'll just hit it a couple more licks and then it'll, and then, oh, Lord, it is too big.
And the difference between a good fit and a too loose fit is 1,000th of an inch.
Yep.
That's 0.001. So, yeah, it doesn't take much to get it a little too fit. I've done that once or twice myself.
In your FAQs you're talking about, you don't discourage a sight pusher, but folks just try to manhandle them or woman handle them into the dovetail. And as you just pointed out, it's not quite that simple, but there's nothing wrong with using a sight pusher if you use it correctly. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Like I said, on most of the newer stuff, the newer designs, our F8s, our R3Ds, they were designed with the thought of using a sight press. Difference in material alloys, difference in dovetail dimensions, they were designed to be much, much easier to fit with a press. Our older designs, the DXTs, and then a lot of the DXT2s, since it was more of a change in dot dimensions and stuff that customers don't see versus the dovetails, they were designed oversized and designed to be fit by a gunsmith. You can use a press, but you really need to get the fitting at least started beforehand. Big thing is, if you're using a press, and this is, I don't care whether it's our sights or Triticons or Metrolites or True Glow, I don't care whose sights it is. If you're trying to install them with a press and you're cranking on the press and you're cranking on the press, and then you decide to clamp the press in a vise and go find a cheater bar because you can't get it to turn by hand, that's a big clue to stop and look at what's going on, because something needs a little work. Either the sight's kind of in there a little off and it's not trying to drive it straight across, or the dovetail needs to be fit a little more. But yeah, if you get to that point and you just go try to find a cheater bar to be able to get it on there, you're probably going to break something.
And like you said, it would be money well spent to hire a qualified gunsmith if you absolutely don't know what you're doing and have the right equipment. That's a lesson I've had to learn many, many times.
Yeah, there's no shame in that at all.
Exactly. There's a question I had looking at my list here. We didn't touch on it under the Tritium category, but it kind of fits all these. Are there knockoffs? I mean, I know there are, because typically they come from China. Are there a lot of knockoffs, especially are there Tritium knockoffs?
You know, I've seen some knockoffs of our sites. So yes, I'm guessing there are. I haven't seen it be a huge problem.
Okay.
At this point in time, not for the iron sights. I've seen lots of attempts to knock off the ACOG, Triticon's, 4-power rifle scope, of varying qualities. But yeah, some of them are coming from China, and China, you can find Tritium lamps sourced out of China.
Wow.
You can find loose Tritium lamps on eBay, from what I've heard. I haven't tried to find that. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, kind of frowns upon that.
I would think so, so anybody that out there that is thinking of a DIY build your own night sight, maybe that's not a good idea.
I would definitely not recommend that.
You guys make a lot of other sights too. I've got a set of your XTI-2 sight or carbine. These are the offset model. I don't have a set of those, so that's why I had you guys send me some of these, and I'm looking forward to it. Talk a little bit about backups or secondary sights for carbines.
Well, you've got two different deals there. You've got backups and you've got secondaries. Backup is more, most of the people, when you say the backups, they're thinking of something that flips up.
Right.
If your aim point, ACOG, whatever goes down, you can pull the optic, flip up the irons, and you've got a set of iron sights, which we make a set of those. They're actually Samson manufacturing bases now that we put our front sight and our rear aperture in. Then you have like a secondary set of sights, an offset set of sights. That came about. You saw a lot of that in 3-gun 2005, 2006, 2007, when you started seeing the TAC optics division getting really, really big. You'd have match directors that would throw a paper target at 6, 8, 10 yards, while you also had steel targets at 2, 3, 4, 500 yards. Well, using a 4-power optic up close is not as easy as using an iron set of iron sights. And that optic is way easier to use at 500 yards than the iron sights.
Yeah.
So you saw several companies do that in 05, 06, 07 in there. And that's about when our original XTIs were designed. That way, if you had an ACOG, which is a fixed 4-power, or in my case, if you were shooting 3-gun and you were running a 1-to-4, well, I almost always left the scope either at 1 because I didn't have any long-range targets, or it was at 4 because I had a long-range targets to deal with. But I wanted something that worked a lot better up close. There's a lot of people that would just camp the rifle and actually look between the elevation and the windage turret, and that works. I wanted something that allowed me a little more precision if I needed it, because when I design stages, if I know I have people doing that, I'm the kind of guy that decides to be mean and evil, and you'll have a headshot surrounded by no shoots. And if you're not reasonably precise, you just hurt yourself on your score because you hit a no shoot rather than the target you were supposed to hit.
So you're the guy.
So that's where we designed that. And originally it was designed, myself and Andrew Brady that owns Lone Star Armory. They designed and manufacture ARs here in Fort Worth. We designed that, and at the time, Andrew was using an ACOG because he was still active duty, and that's what he had on his duty rifle. And I was shooting a Night Force 1-4, both very small optics that don't have rather large windage knobs. And both Andrew and I have fairly high cheekbones and very tight cheek welds compared to a lot of other people. So we had some issues with the original XTIs not allowing people to see them quite as well as they wanted to. We came out with the XTI 2s because windage knobs have gotten larger on scopes. Scope tubes have gotten larger. When the original version was designed, most people were still using 1-inch tubes, and you had some people like me that were actually using 30 millimeter tubes. Well, 30 millimeter is pretty common now, and 34 and 35 millimeter tubes are getting more and more common, along with the larger windage knobs that are available on a lot of optics. We came out with the XTI 2s that come off the gun a little further and sit a little taller. It allows more people to get a cheek weld, and it allows them to see it around the windage knob on their scope. But the same concept is there. That allows me, if I've got a bunch of stuff going on and my scope is cranked up to 4 power, I can just roll the rifle a few degrees inboard, and now I've got some iron sights that allows me to make a quick, accurate, precise shot out to 15, 25, 35 yards, pretty easy.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to using them. So I've been on your website. I've mentioned your website. You guys have a great FAQ page and all that. How do folks learn more about XS sights?
Well, absolutely. Go to the website, www.xssights.com. There's plenty of stuff there. There's, we don't do a paper catalog anymore because everything's on the website, and it's a lot easier to keep the website up to date and current than it is to do a print catalog. I mean, for example, we had, I forget which one it was, we had something that we just finished up, the DXT2 variant, and rather than waiting for the next catalog to come out at the end of the year, because that's always when you did catalogs, was in the fall to be out and ready for SHOT Show in January. Well, now as soon as we get pictures taken, I get the steel off the machines, it gets glued, we get lamps installed, we get all the Ember technology for the DXT2 put into it. I hand it off to the marketing department. They take pictures. It's on the website a week later. So the website is actually the best place to look and see what's new and what's available right now. As you've noted a couple of times, there's plenty of good FAQs, and there's links to some of our YouTube videos. And there's also pick up the phone and give us a call. We've got several people, full-time customer service. When they get busy, the phone rolls over, and I actually get, last week when we were shorthanded, I got quite a few customer service phone calls, and it's no big deal. We're happy to talk to the customers. We're happy to help them out. I mean, that's what it's all about, is making sure the customer's happy with what they get and answering the questions that they have so that they're happy with it when they get it.
Excellent. So closing thoughts. Somebody's thinking about a big dot. What would you tell them?
I love my big dots. If you're looking for something that's easy to see and fast, there's just not, I hadn't found anything that I can acquire faster on presentation from a holster or see in a better range of conditions for an iron sight than our big dot.
Excellent. Monte, thanks for taking time out to talk to us. I learned a lot, and I'm ready to start mounting some more sights on my pistols. So thanks a lot.
Hey, no problem. Thank you for the opportunity. It was good talking to you. And when you get around to installing those, if you have any questions, give us a call. We'll talk you through it as best we can, and happy to do it.
Will do. It was great talking to Monte Long, and I think as soon as I'm done here at the Guns Magazine studios, I'm going to tackle my next pistol sight installation. And with that, we hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Please tell all your friends, even those de-unifying liberals. Guns Magazine was first in the business, and we're using our decades of friendships to bring you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got questions or comments about the show, please email me. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you don't miss out on anything by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast catcher, YouTube, and of course at gunsmagazine.com. While you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publication, American Handgunner Magazine, at americanhandgunner.com, and we'd also appreciate it if you'd share a favorite episode or some kind words on your own social media. And finally, I'd like to remind you to check out our sponsor, the guys and gals who really know accuracy at Berger Bullets. Learn more at bergerbullets.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.